All right, next War Gamers. I'm back with the promised air phase. I think we'll do naval as a second video, second installment, second episode, whatever you want to call it. As I mentioned, I think in the first or second, probably the first one, part of the setup is that the our allied player rather, has to push some units back into the flown box based on the strategic surprise scenario or situation. So when you look at that, let me zoom in a little bit here. Make that a little bigger, I guess. A lot of these guys are already pushed back. All of the allied planes that were in Japan are pushed back. So that's why these are starting in flown. And then you've got, so notice the play test. This is facing the correct way, but the boxes are in the wrong order. This should be the ready box, flown box out. These doesn't move, and this should be the boarded box with the appropriate sizes. So you're just gonna have to bear with me that it's backwards for now. The printed game, of course, will be fixed. But anyway, the first step, though, in the air naval phase is 1A. So this is where I said those strikes would become important, although in retrospect, I should have, let me transition back real quick. I should have done maybe another raid on one of these airfields or something, because what happens is the owning player moves, so that would be, in this case, the allied player moves half the number of strike markers rounded down in air units. So in that case, and this means there's one strike marker here, and one here. I don't think there are any other air bases or airfields with strike markers. So 3 halved rounded down is 1. So if I had done at least one more, it would have been 2. But anyway, that means that the ROC or allied player in this case is going to have to move one of the units from the ready box down into the flown box. So we're just going to go ahead and take this guy, move him down. And then in step 1B, the opposing player, in this case the allied player, sorry about the dings, in this case the allied player, or non-allied player rather, is going to do that same thing, half the number of destroyed air bases or airfields, and that's where on the game record display you needed to keep track of that. But in this case, I believe there was only one. Let's take a look. I forget already. So this one was destroyed. I don't think we destroyed another airbase or airfield. We did not. Those are ports. So it's going to be 1 halved, rounded down, but to a minimum of 1. So go back here. So this is the non-allied player, and I'm going to take, as the non-allied player, obviously one of the more capable airplanes, and move it down into the flown box. All right, then you reset that airbase's counter to 0 so that you can start tracking it again. Then both players place air units in their superiority box, player with AWACS advantage last. So in other words, if the allies were going to contest air superiority, they could move air units up, right? Game-wise speaking, I don't think they want to go up against this, right? Because the PRC, they're just going to overload this with a bunch of these, right? These guys, all they do is air superiority, right? So it's air-to-air value, combat support value, strike value. These guys do nothing but air superiority. So why wouldn't the non-allied player put them up there? They could fly some of these strike planes, but why not just save those for their strike value? Since even if, and we're going to run through this as a what if, even if the allies contested, we'll go ahead and put them all up, right? Why not? It's 4 planes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So it's a 3-to-1 probably massacre. We'll run through it just to run through the rules. But, you know, if I was playing a game, I probably wouldn't actually contest the air picture at this point in time. So anyway, once they're in, then you do engagements. In this case, the AWACS advantage player sets the number of engagements equal to the AWACS advantage. So let's go take a look at what that is right now. So if we go over here, we can see AWACS advantage is 0. So in this case, it's going to be just the first engagement. So 0 and 1, basically the same thing in those terms of setting engagements. So we'll just take this first F-22 and we'll put this J-11 against it. And then the non-AWACS advantaged player sets an engagement. So in here, again, it's not going to matter too much. So they'll take their F-22 and go up against this guy. And then the PRC sets one, so they'll take this. And then finally the ROC, our allied player, sets another one. They'll do that. Now that the allied player has run out of planes, the PRC player has the option, let me move this over here, to double up against any of these guys. And he might as well, right? In this case, it's not going to make too much of a difference. So he's going to go ahead and assign these guys out like this. And these guys will just hang out in here and be potential future escorts and or interceptors for later in the game turn. So now we're going to run through air-to-air combat. Air-to-air combat, you basically have 3 rounds of combat. Long range, per engagement, long range, standoff, and dogfight. You always start with the round for which at least one side has the capability. And you know what? Let me zoom in so we can really get a look at these guys. Make sure that's good. Good, and maybe one more. What do you think? One more? Nope. Won't zoom anymore. So that's what you're getting. If you take a look, so we got air-to-air value, combat support value, strike value. The star means, 1 star means standoff. So this guy can do standoff. The F-16 can do standoff air-to-air and standoff strike. There's never any standoff combat support, at least not yet. The -1 over here is pilot skill. It's also training, doctrine, that kind of stuff. The M is medium ranged, and the A means it is an all-weather aircraft. So if you look at all these guys, none of them have long range. Let me grab here this J-20. So if this J-20 was down here, this two asterisks mean that it has long range capability. In this case, we didn't fly that, so we'll just put it back, right? The way combat works, we skip the long range side. We go straight to standoff because that's the first value that both either side in the engagement has. My recommendation when doing air-to-air combat is just go left to right and just do all the steps, at least in air superiority combat. In interception, it gets a little different, which hopefully we can get to later. Standoff combat is always simultaneous, so it doesn't really matter who goes first. In this case, I'm going to have the PRC roll. There's twice. So if you look at the advanced air combat chart, the way this works, you compare the air-to-air value. So the J-11 has a 5 versus the F-16's 4. So that means the PRC will be on the +1 column of the advanced air combat table. For strikes, there are no modifiers that apply because, well, none of them apply. So it's a straight up roll on the +1. We're going to do that twice. So you always roll no matter what the initial result was. In this case, a 2 and a 0. So a 2 is going to abort the aircraft, but sorry, a 2 damages and aborts the aircraft. Sorry, I was on the 0 column. And a 0 destroys it. So you can ignore the damaged and aborted, and you just simply eliminate that F-16. That also, of course, gives the PRC 2 VP for splashing an air unit. This engagement is done. There is no re-engagement in air superiority, so we'll just move them off to the side. They survive the combat. Next, again, so we have a 1 on the +1 and 1 on the 0 column. So on the +1 column, we get a 3, which is going to be an abort, and an 8, which is going to be a nothing. So this guy's going to abort, but he still fires back. He's going to take the better shot against the J-10, and an 8 is nothing. So then we just right-click, send them to the ROC aborted box, and these guys are also done. So just repeat the process, but now notice we're on the +2 column because it's 5 to 3. So 2 rolls on the +2. 5 is an abort, and a 6 is an AD. So let's talk about the AD. Normally, so in here, you would just mark it as disadvantaged. What that normally would mean is in the next round of combat, this plane that got the advantage fires before this plane in dogfight. Now that's going to be true regardless because in dogfight it is no longer simultaneous. It's based on air-to-air value. Highest air-to-air value goes first unless you're tied, in which case it is simultaneous. Or if you're advantaged, then the advantaged plane goes first. So in this case, it doesn't matter because this guy got aborted by the first roll. So we're just going to send him to the aborted box. Boom. These guys survive, clearly. Oh, let's fire back. That boarded plane does get the fire back on the -2. With a 9, it won't matter. So again, we're just going to repeat. The +2 with a 5 will abort that aircraft again, and that's it. So then what you do is you count, so you determine AWACS advantage, you update the AWACS advantage, and you do that by comparing, I'm sorry, wow, getting ahead of myself. You set the air superiority based on the ratio of air units in the air box. So in this case, it's, what did I say before, 12? So it's 12 to a nominal 1 because there are no Allied planes. So rather than 12 to 0, which makes no sense, it's a nominal 1. So 12 to 1. So if we transition back over here and look at the air superiority, let me zoom in. I can't get any further to the right, but so we're looking over here. If you see, supremacy is 5 to 1 plus. We had 12 to 1, so we can just set this to superiority for the PRC. If you'll notice, let me move that back 1 just so you can take a look at it, or supremacy rather. AWACS shift is 2 to the right because they have superiority. I mean supremacy, I keep saying that. Supremacy. So down here on the AWACS, we're just going to go, oops, let me just use the arrow key. Boom. Now AWACS advantage is 2 for the PRC. So that concludes all the air superiority stuff. The next thing we're going to do is roll for sea control. That's going to be relatively involved, again, because it's Taiwan, but it's a good one to showcase that. And we will do that in the next video. Thanks for listening.